I am looking at a printed email receipt from Ticketmaster. It lists 2 Platinum VIP experience passes for a classic rock reunion tour, totaling $800. It's just a piece of paper, flimsy and wrinkled, but in my mind, it weighs a ton. That receipt cost exactly 4 lives. Well, 4 life-saving doses of epinephrine to be exact. If you want to know how a rock concert ended with my parents in handcuffs and me being loaded into an ambulance while the neighbors watched, stay with me until the end. My name is Maya. I'm 24 now, and I work as a pharmacist, specifically in compliance and safety. I spend my days ensuring that protocols are followed, that labels are accurate, and that dangerous things are kept locked away. It's a boring job to some people, but to me, the order is beautiful. It's safe. But let's just say 6 years ago, my life was anything but safe. I was the buzzkill daughter living in the guest room of the wildest party house on the block, trying to survive 2 people who thought parenthood was just a hobby they could opt out of whenever the weekend rolled around. To understand why the police cars were blocking our driveway that night, you have to understand the scene. It wasn't a quiet Tuesday. It was chaos. I remember the way the red and blue emergency lights were bouncing off the chrome of the ambulance, creating this strobe light effect that made everything look like a horror movie. My chest was still heaving, that terrifying mechanical struggle for air that happens when your throat is closing up. But my eyes were glued to the driveway. My parents, let's call them Peter and Linda, because they hated being called Mom and Dad, were standing there. And honestly, the visual was almost funny if it wasn't so tragic. They were wearing matching vintage band t-shirts, sweat dripping down their faces from the concert, looking like 2 teenagers who got busted for staying out past curfew. But they weren't teenagers. They were 45 years old. And they weren't getting grounded. They were getting read their Miranda rights. Peter was trying to laugh it off, doing this nervous, jerky movement with his shoulders like he was trying to shake off the officer's grip, while Linda was just staring at me, her eyeliner smeared, with this look of absolute betrayal. Not guilt. Betrayal. Like I was the one who had ruined their night. Basically, that was the dynamic. That was always the dynamic. You have to understand, growing up in that house was like living in a frat house run by people who legally controlled your bank account. Peter and Linda were the cool parents. You know the type, the ones who let you drink wine at 14, the ones who didn't believe in curfews, the ones who wanted to be best friends with all my classmates. To the outside world, they were magnetic. They were the life of the party. But inside the house? Let's just say the party never stopped. And I was the designated driver for a car I didn't even know how to drive. I was the glitch in their perfect carefree matrix. See, they wanted a sidekick, a mini-me to take to festivals and brunch. Instead, they got a kid with a severe life-threatening nut allergy. And I mean, severe. Airborne sensitivity, cross-contamination, the whole 9 yards. If a peanut touched my food, my airway would swell shut in minutes. It required vigilance. It required reading labels. It required responsibility. And honestly, responsibility was something Peter and Linda were allergic to. I remember this one specific incident when I was 10. I had a reaction at a birthday party. Nothing major, just some hives. But it scared me. I came home crying, wanting comfort. And Peter just looked at me, sighed this heavy, exhausted sigh, and told me to stop being so dramatic. He didn't check my breathing. He turned up the volume on the TV. That was the moment I realized, I am on my own. My survival is an inconvenience to them. And here's the thing about medical conditions like mine, they are expensive. This was during the height of the national EpiPen shortage. You might remember it on the news. Prices skyrocketed. In pharmacies were back-ordered for months. People were driving 3 states over just to find a single 2-pack. It was terrifying for normal people. For me, living with 2 people who spent their paychecks on concert tickets and designer tequila, It was a nightmare. So, I became a hoarder. Not of trash, but of life. I saved every penny from my tutoring gigs and secret babysitting jobs. I scoured the internet. I called pharmacies daily. Over the course of a year, I had managed to build a gold stash. 4 brand new, unexpired EpiPens. 4 chances to live. I kept them in a heavy-duty steel lockbox under my bed. It was fireproof, waterproof, and, theoretically, parent-proof. That box was my security blanket. I would check it every night before I went to sleep. Click, click, open. Seeing those 4 yellow and blue tubes sitting in the foam padding, it was the only time my heart rate would actually slow down. It was my insurance policy against their negligence. Have you ever realized that the people supposed to protect you are actually the ones holding the door open for the wolf? Because that's what it felt like. I wasn't scared of the world. I was scared of them. The threat wasn't subtle either. It was a hostage situation. Whenever I complained about the loud music at 3 a.m., about the empty fridge, about the strangers sleeping on our couch, they would dangle my housing over my head. They had this favorite phrase. Linda would say it while checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, not even looking at me. She'd say that I was killing their vibe. She'd remind me that I was turning 18 in a few months, and if I didn't like the way they ran their house, the real world was waiting. They made it clear. Support was conditional. If I was a good vibe, I got a roof. If I was a burden, I was out. And the enablers? Well, that was my Aunt Carol. I remember trying to talk to her once, sitting on her porch, trying to explain that I was scared to eat dinner at home because they never washed the pans properly. I was shaking, literally shaking. And she just patted my hand and gave me this pitying smile. She told me that Peter and Linda were just free spirits. She said they needed to blow off steam because working corporate jobs was so stressful for them. She actually told me, and I can still hear the dismissal in her voice, that I was too rigid, that I needed to loosen up, or I'd wind up lonely. She made me feel like my desire to stay alive was a personality flaw, so I stopped talking. I stopped complaining. I just focused on the lockbox. It's strange, though. The brain tries to protect you. It tries to find the good. There was this one fleeting moment, maybe 6 months before the end. It was Christmas. For once, they hadn't thrown a party. It was just the 3 of us. Linda actually cooked a turkey. Safely. Peter made hot chocolate. We sat and watched a movie, and for 2 hours, nobody was drunk, nobody was screaming, and nobody was threatening to kick me out. I remember looking at them, laughing at some stupid scene on the TV, and feeling this ache in my chest. I missed them. I missed the parents they could have been. I saw the potential for love there, buried under layers of selfishness and arrested development. But that memory, honestly, it just makes what happened later hurt worse. It was a lie. It was a momentary glitch in their programming, not a change of heart. Because you don't do what they did to someone you love. You don't gamble with your child's breath just to hear a guitar solo from the front row. The atmosphere in the house that week leading up to the concert was electric, but in the wrong way. It was manic. The shortage was all over the news. Every news channel was talking about how desperate parents were for epinephrine. And Peter and Linda? They weren't worried about me. They were complaining about money. They had maxed out their credit cards on a vacation they couldn't afford, and this reunion tour was announced. It was their favorite band. The tickets were resale only. Scalper prices. $400 a pop. I remember walking into the kitchen and seeing them huddled over the laptop, whispering. When I walked in, they slammed the screen shut. They looked guilty. Not the "we ate the last cookie" guilty. They looked like predators who had just spotted a wounded animal. I didn't put the pieces together then. I was too busy trying to keep my head down, trying to make it to graduation, trying to keep my lockbox safe. I thought the lockbox was enough. I thought steel and a combination code could protect me from their greed. I was wrong. Steel breaks. And parents. Sometimes they break too. But they didn't break down. They broke bad. It was a Tuesday afternoon, specifically 4:15 p.m., when the silence of the house hit me. Usually, our house vibrated, bass thumping from the living room speakers, the blender whirring for margaritas, Peter shouting at the TV. But that day, the air was stale. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the pressured drop before a tornado touches down. I had come home early from the library. I remember walking up the stairs, and the carpet felt worn under my feet. My door was closed, which was normal. I like to keep a barrier between my sanctuary and their chaos. But when I turned the handle, something felt off. The friction was wrong. The latch didn't click the way it usually did. I walked in. Everything looked fine on the surface. Bed made, desk organized, but my stomach dropped. You know that instinct? The lizard brain screaming that a predator has been in your cave? I dropped my backpack and fell to my knees beside the bed. I didn't even breathe. I reached into the darkness underneath, my fingers searching for the cold steel of the lockbox. It was there, but it was light. Too light. I pulled it out into the afternoon sun. The lock hadn't been picked. They hadn't guessed the combination. The metal around the latch was twisted, gnawed open with brute force, scratches deep into the gray paint. Someone had taken a screwdriver and pried it open like a clam. I opened the lid. And honestly, the sight of that empty black foam padding was more violent than if they had hit me. 4 empty slots. The gold stash. My lifeline. Gone. My hands started to shake. Not a little tremble, but a violent vibration that traveled up my arms to my shoulders. My ears started ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the traffic outside. I sat there on the floor, staring at the empty box, trying to process the logic. Who would steal medicine? It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't cash. It was epinephrine. And then I saw the pamphlet on my desk. Ticketmaster invoice. They had left it there, careless. Or maybe arrogant. Maybe they wanted me to know. I grabbed my phone. My fingers were numb, clumsy, but I dialed Peter's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, he picked up. I expected him to sound guilty. I expected a hushed whisper. But instead, I heard wind rushing past a car window and classic rock blasting in the background. He sounded happy. He sounded exhilarated. "Hey, kiddo, we're making great time," he shouted like nothing had happened. I didn't even say hello. I just asked, my voice cracking, "Where are they? Where are my pens?" There was a pause. The music turned down slightly. I heard Linda's voice in the background, something muffled and annoyed. Then Peter sighed, that same heavy, dramatic sigh he used when the waiter brought him the wrong wine. "Look, Maya," he said, his tone shifting from party mode to condescending dad mode instantly. "Don't start this. We needed the cash. The scalper prices surged last minute and we were short." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You sold them? You sold my medicine?" "We didn't sell your medicine," he mocked, mimicking my panic. "We liquidated an asset you weren't using. You haven't had a reaction in 3 years, Maya. 3 years. They were just sitting there gathering dust. Someone else needed them, and we needed the tickets. It's a win-win. We'll get you a generic one when the paycheck hits next week." "Next week?" I screamed. "What if I eat something today? What if—" And here's the thing. This is the moment where a parent is supposed to realize they messed up. They're supposed to pump the brakes. But Linda grabbed the phone. I heard the rustle of the device changing hands, and then her voice was in my ear. It was cold. Ice cold. "Listen to me," she hissed. "Do not ruin this night for us. We have fed you, housed you, and put up with your neuroses for 18 years. We deserve one night of fun. If you call the police, or if you call your aunt and whine, don't bother being there when we get back. You'll be on the street, Maya, and good luck affording an apartment and your precious medicine with zero credit history." She didn't wait for a response. She hung up. I sat there, the phone screen going black in my hand. The silence of the room rushed back in, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was clarifying. Basically, that conversation was the death of my parents. Oh, they were still physically alive, driving down the highway in their leased BMW, singing along to the radio. But the parents I had been mourning, the ones I hoped would one day love me, they died the second Linda threatened me with homelessness for wanting to stay alive. I stood up. My knees cracked. The shaking in my hands stopped. It was strange. 1 second, I was a terrified teenager. The next, I was something else. I felt this cold calm wash over me. It was clinical. It was the way a surgeon looks at a gangrenous limb. You don't cry over the limb. You cut it off to save the body. I realized then that family is just a biological coincidence. These people weren't my protectors. They were parasites. They had mined my health for concert tickets. They had looked at my safety and seen a dollar sign. I looked at the empty lockbox again, and I realized something else. They were so arrogant, so drunk on their own entitlement, that they had left the digital door wide open. They took their phones, sure, but in the living room, sitting on the coffee table, was the family iPad. The one logged into everything. The one Linda used for her side hustles. They thought I was paralyzed. They thought I was the scared little girl who would cry in her pillow and wait for them to come home so she could beg for forgiveness. They didn't realize they had just created a hostile witness. I walked out of my room. I didn't slam the door. I walked downstairs, my steps silent on the hardwood. I went to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water. I drank it slowly. I needed to be hydrated. I needed to be sharp. And the sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the living room. I looked at the iPad. It was sitting there, a sleek slab of glass and aluminum. It looked innocent. But I knew what was inside. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a compliance officer conducting an audit, and I was about to find the non-conformance that would shut this entire operation down. I sat on the couch, the leather creaking beneath me. I pressed the home button. No passcode. Of course not. Why lock the device when you think you own the people living in the house? The screen lit up, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I felt ready. The house was getting darker. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want to alert the neighbors that I was home, that I was awake, that I was hunting. The only light came from the iPad screen, casting a ghostly blue glow on my face. I swiped open the interface. My fingers hovered for a second. It felt invasive, violating the privacy of the people who raised me. But then I remembered the twisted metal of my lockbox. I remembered Linda's voice telling me I was a burden. That hesitation evaporated. I started with the photos. Nothing incriminating there, just endless selfies of them holding drinks, pouting at the camera, trying to look 25. Then I went to the browser history, and let's just say, the search history was a roadmap of their desperation. How much do EpiPens sell for underground? Black market medical supply prices 2024. Is it illegal to sell prescription meds if they are my kids? Ticketmaster VIP Platinum Resale Instant Buy. My stomach turned. They had planned this. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision because they were short on cash. This was calculated. They had researched the market value of my life. I switched to the Facebook app. Linda was always on Marketplace selling vintage furniture that was just our old junk painted white. I clicked on the messenger icon. There it was, the top conversation. The buyer's name was Brad Jimrat. The timestamp was 1:30 p.m. today, just 2 hours before I came home. I opened the chat, and honestly, reading it felt like watching a car crash in slow motion. I needed to document this. I needed to see it clearly. I took a screenshot, then another. The text read, Linda. Hey Brad, I've got the goods. 4 of them. Brand new. Expiration 2026. The good brand, not the generic crap. Brad. Sweet. My insurance won't cover another refill and my kid is high risk. You sure these are legit? Where'd you get them? Linda. My daughter. She's got a stash she doesn't use. She's basically faking the allergy for attention anyway. Hasn't had a wheeze in years. It's a waste to let them sit there. Brad. Damn, okay, how much? Linda. $200 each. Cash or Venmo. I need it now. We have a deadline. Brad. Done. I'm on my way. I stared at that sentence. She's basically faking the allergy for attention anyway. I felt the blood rushing in my ears again, that high-pitched whine. It wasn't just the theft. It was the erasure. She didn't just steal the medicine, she stole the reality of my condition to justify it to a stranger. She made me the villain in her own narrative so she could feel good about being the hero to Brad. I scrolled down. There was a Venmo confirmation screenshot sent in the chat. You paid Linda $800 for gym equipment. Gym equipment. They even laundered the description. I navigated to their email. I needed the other half of the equation, the why. I found the Ticketmaster confirmation instantly. Order confirmed. 2 times Platinum VIP meet and greet packages. Total, $845.50. The timestamps lined up perfectly. 2:15 p.m. The Venmo hits. 2:18 p.m. The tickets are bought. 3 minutes. It took them 3 minutes to convert my safety into a backstage pass. I sat there, the iPad heavy in my lap. The room was freezing now, or maybe it was just me. My hands were ice cold. I wasn't crying. I was past crying. I felt this strange, vibrating clarity. It was the adrenaline of survival. I had the receipts. I had the confession. I had the motive. But in the eyes of the law, what was this? Petty theft? Domestic dispute? Parents have the right to control their minors' property? I was 17. Technically, they still owned me. If I called the police now, they might just come, take a report, and leave. Peter and Linda would come home, find out I snitched, and follow through on their threat. I'd be homeless by sunrise. I needed more than just theft. I needed undeniable proof of endangerment. I needed the world to see not just that they stole an object, but that they left me in a burning building without a fire extinguisher. I looked at the kitchen counter. Earlier that day, before they left, Peter had made a protein snack for the road. He was on a health kick, keto, paleo, whatever the trend was. I walked over to the sink. There was a knife sitting on the cutting board, and a jar. Organic, crunchy peanut butter. The lid was off. A glob of it was smeared on the counter. The knife still had residue on it, and right next to it, my special, safe frying pan. The one I had bought with my own money, the one that was strictly off limits to them. It was sitting in the drying rack, wet. I picked it up. I smelled it. Beneath the scent of dish soap, there it was. The faint, oily, unmistakable smell of roasted peanuts. Peter had used my pan to mix his protein glop. He had washed it, lazily, and put it back. Cross-contamination. I wasn't safe. I had never been safe. The house wasn't just empty of medicine, it was seeded with landmines. I looked at the pan, then I looked at the iPad, and then I looked at the phone on the wall. A plan started to form. It wasn't a plan I wanted. It was a terrifying, dangerous nuclear option. But it was the only way to ensure they never, ever had power over me again. I had to trigger the trap. But I couldn't just say I was in danger. I had to be the evidence. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The house felt huge, echoing with the silence of their absence. I looked at the pan in my hand, then at the smear of peanut butter on the counter. My fingertips were tingling, not from fear, but from contact. I must have touched the handle, then brushed my lip. It was subtle, a phantom itch spreading across my jawline, but I knew what it meant. The timer had started. In the past, this was the moment I would have called them. I would have screamed, cried, begged them to come home or tell me where they hid a backup stash. But I looked at the iPad screen, at the cheerful "sold" message in the chat log, and I realized calling them wasn't a rescue plan. It was a liability. If I called, they would tell me to drink some water or stop overreacting. They would delay, and then they would delete the messages. I had to secure the leverage before my throat closed up. I moved quickly. My hands were steady, despite the rising heat in my cheeks. I opened my personal email on the iPad, an account they didn't know about. I attached the screenshots, the marketplace chat, the Venmo receipt, the Ticketmaster invoice, and the search history. Subject, evidence, case file, sent. I watched the progress bar hit 100%. It was like locking a vault door. No matter what happened tonight, no matter how much they gaslit me or the police, the digital footprint was safe. They could smash the iPad, they could burn the house down, but they couldn't erase the server. Next, I had to prepare the stage. A crime scene tells a story, and I needed this story to be legible to the first officer through the door. I walked into the living room. I placed the empty, mangled lockbox in the center of the coffee table. I propped it open so the hollowed-out foam interior was facing the entrance. Next to it, I placed the jar of peanut butter. Next to that, the iPad, screen set to never sleep, displaying the text message. She's basically faking the allergy for attention anyway. It was a triptych of negligence: the weapon, the allergen, the theft, the empty box, and the motive, the messages. My breathing was getting hitchy now. A soft whistle on the inhale. The itching had moved to my throat. It wasn't full anaphylaxis yet. I had time. But the freight train was coming. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. I threw the deadbolt open. I didn't want the paramedics to have to break it down. I wanted them to walk right into the exhibit I had curated. Then, I picked up the landline. I didn't dial my parents. I didn't dial my aunt. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, robotic. I am having a severe allergic reaction, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, tight, gravelly. I am in anaphylactic shock. I am a minor. I am alone. Okay, honey. Do you have an EpiPen? No, I said, and I made sure to enunciate every syllable. My parents took them. They sold them today. The box is empty. There was a pause on the line. A heavy, stunned silence that told me everything I needed to know. I had just logged the official record. Paramedics are on the way, she said, her voice shifting from professional to urgent. Stay on the line with me. I'm leaving the door unlocked, I rasped. I'm going to lie down on the couch. I hung up. I know you're not supposed to hang up, but I was done talking. I went back to the couch and lay down. I positioned myself so I was facing the door. I closed my eyes and focused on slowing my heart rate. Panic speeds up the venom. Calm slows it down. I thought about Peter and Linda. Right now, they were probably screaming the lyrics to Sweet Child O' Mine, holding up their overpriced beers, feeling young and alive. They were celebrating their freedom. They had no idea that back home, the house was rigged. I didn't want to do this. Honestly, acting like a victim was harder than the actual planning. I wanted to run. I wanted to drive myself to the ER. But if I did that, they would win. They would come home, find the house empty, hide the evidence, and spin a story about how I ran away. No, they needed to walk into the lights. They needed to walk into the consequences. I heard the sirens in the distance, low at first, then getting louder. A rising wail that cut through the suburban quiet. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The first thing I remember is the noise, the sound of heavy boots on the hardwood floor, the crackle of a radio, the Velcro ripping of a blood pressure cuff. Then the sensation of ice-cold air rushing into my lungs, the epinephrine shot. It burns. It feels like someone lit a match inside your muscle. But then, the air comes back. The vice grip around my throat loosened just enough for me to gasp. I was lying on the stretcher, groggy, my vision swimming. A paramedic, a guy with kind eyes and a grim expression, was leaning over me. "We've got you, Maya. You're stable. We're moving you out." But I couldn't leave yet. I grabbed his sleeve. I had to make sure the trap was set. I pointed a shaking finger at the coffee table, at the iPad. "They sold them," I wheezed. "Read the text." A police officer, a woman with a sharp jawline and a notebook, followed my finger. She looked at the empty lockbox. She looked at the jar of peanut butter. And then she picked up the iPad. I watched her face. I watched the professional detachment slide right off. Her eyes widened. She swiped once, twice. Then she looked at me, then back at the screen, and her expression hardened into something scary. It was the look of a predator locating a target. She didn't say a word, and she just turned to her partner and nodded at the evidence. "Bag it," she said, "and get a statement from the doctor at the ER. This is a crime scene." They didn't turn the lights off when they wheeled me out to the ambulance. They left the house lit up like a Christmas tree. The police cars were parked silently in the driveway, lights killing the darkness of the suburban street. They weren't leaving. They were waiting. I wasn't there for the next 2 hours, but the neighbors told me everything. It was 2:15 a.m. when the headlights swept across the lawn. A sleek black Uber XL pulled up. Peter and Linda tumbled out, and they weren't alone. They had brought another couple back with them, some new best friends they had met in the VIP lounge. You could hear them from down the block. They were laughing. That loud, slurry, performative laughter of people who are desperate to prove they are having the best night ever. Linda was wearing a tour shirt that was 2 sizes too small, stumbling a little in her heels. Peter was high-fiving the other guy. They saw the flashing lights. And here is the part that haunts me, the part that proves I was right to do what I did. They didn't run toward the house. They didn't scream my name. Peter actually stopped, threw his hands up, and groaned. Loudly. "Oh, for God's sake!" he shouted, his voice carrying in the night air. "You have got to be kidding me. She probably set off the alarm again, or she called the cops because the music was too loud in her head." Linda was worse. She turned to their new friends, rolling her eyes so hard she nearly fell over. "I am so sorry, guys," she slurred, "you putting on this mask of the long-suffering martyr. Our daughter she's a lot. She's extremely sensitive. She does this kind of stuff for attention when she feels left out. Just ignore the drama. I'll handle her." They walked up the driveway with the confidence of royalty. Peter actually waved at the police officer standing by the door, thinking he was a security guard or a noise complaint patrol. "Officer!" Peter bellowed, pulling out his wallet like he was going to tip him. "Sorry about the noise. We'll keep it down. Just a little misunderstanding with the alarm system, I'm sure. My kid is a bit of a hypochondriac, you know how it is." He reached for the door handle. He was smiling. He was holding a plastic cup from the concert venue. He looked like a man who owned the world. He had no idea that he was walking into a cage. Inside the house, the silence was deafening. The officer didn't move. He didn't take the tip. He just stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. "After you, sir," the officer said. His voice was flat, dead. Peter laughed, a sharp, arrogant bark. "See? No problem. Come on in, guys. Let's crack that tequila." They walked in. All four of them, the cool parents and their audience. They walked right past the empty lockbox. They walked right past the peanut butter jar. They walked right into the center of the living room where three other officers were waiting, standing in a semicircle, hands resting near their belts. The laughter died instantly. It was like someone cut the power cord. Peter looked around, confused, blinking in the harsh light. "Whoa. Okay, what is this? A raid? Did Maya tell you I have weed? Because it's legal now. Guys." He was still trying to be the cool guy. He was still trying to joke his way out of it. But Linda saw the iPad. She saw the screen still glowing on the table. And for the first time that night, she looked sober. The female officer, Officer Miller, I later learned, didn't shout. She didn't have to. She just held up the iPad like it was a holy scripture of their sins. The screen was still glowing, that damn text message burning into the retina of everyone in the room. "Sir," she said, her voice cutting through the stale smell of concert sweat and tequila. "Is this your account? Linda Loves Life?" Peter blinked, his smile faltering. Well, that's my wife's." "Look, if this is about the tax thing, we can—" "It's not about taxes," Miller interrupted. She swiped the screen. "It's about the sale of 4 prescription epinephrine auto-injectors to a third party at 1:30 p.m. today. Proceeds used for—" She glanced at the Ticketmaster invoice. "VIP Platinum Experience." The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the plastic cup Peter was still holding. The concert friends, that couple they had dragged home, looked at each other. The woman took a step back. She looked at Linda, then at the empty lockbox, then at the police. The realization hit her. This wasn't a cool house. This was a crime scene. She put her drink down on the nearest table, wiping her hand on her jeans like she had touched something filthy. "You sold her meds?" the friend whispered. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Linda panicked. The cool mom mask cracked, revealing the desperate narcissist underneath. She lunged forward, not at the cop, but at the narrative. "No, you don't understand. She doesn't use them. She hoards them. It was just sitting there. She's doing this to punish us because we went out." She pointed a shaking finger at the empty doorway where the stretcher had been. "She's faking it. Check her throat. She's fine." Officer Miller didn't blink. Paramedics confirmed anaphylactic shock. Oxygen saturation was 85%. If she had waited 10 more minutes, she wouldn't be faking it, ma'am. She'd be dead. That was the signal. The officers moved in. It wasn't like TV. It was messy and loud and pathetic. Peter tried to pull the "Do you know who I am?" card, puffing his chest out. "Get your hands off me. I pay your salary. This is my house. I have rights." 2 officers grabbed him. He resisted, trying to twist away. And that's when the cool dad facade ended. They slammed him against the wall, hard. A family photo frame rattled and crashed to the floor, glass shattering. The sound was distinct, the sound of their perfect image breaking. Peter grunted. The wind knocked out of him, his cheek pressed against the drywall. "Ow! Watch the shoulder. I have a tennis injury." Linda was worse. When the cuffs clicked onto her wrists, she didn't fight. She collapsed. She started wailing, not for me, but for herself. "My bracelets! You're scratching my bracelets. Peter, do something. Tell them." They were hauled out the front door. I wasn't there to see it, but the neighbors were. Mrs. Higgins from across the street, the one Linda always made fun of for being boring, was standing on her lawn in her bathrobe. The entire cul-de-sac was watching. They saw Peter, the man who bragged about his consulting firm, being shoved into the back of a squad car, his vintage band t-shirt ripped at the collar. They saw Linda, the woman who judged everyone's parenting, sobbing mascara tears, screaming that she was a victim, that her daughter was a ungrateful brat. The ambulance had already left with me inside, but the flashing lights of the cruisers illuminated the driveway. The concert friends were giving statements to the police on the lawn, shaking their heads, distancing themselves as fast as possible. The officer leaned into the back of the squad car where Peter was thrashing, trying to kick the window. Peter was screaming something about how it was just a business transaction, how I was property, how they provided a roof over my head. Officer Miller looked at him, closed the door, eyed and leaned through the open window. She looked him dead in the eye and delivered the only truth that mattered that night. "You didn't sell a vibe, sir. You sold a felony." I didn't see my parents for 3 days after the arrest. I spent those days in a hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped in a steady, rhythmic reassurance that I was still alive. For the first time in 17 years, I slept. I really slept. There was no bass thumping through the floorboards, no fear of a drunken argument spilling into the hallway. Just the clean, antiseptic silence of the ward. Aunt Carol came to visit on the second day. She walked in with this frantic energy, clutching a bag of fast food like it was a peace offering. She sat down, looked at the IV in my arm, and tried to run the old playbook. "They're a mess, Maya," she whispered, leaning in like we were co-conspirators. "Peter is losing his mind in the holding cell. Linda is, well, she's hysterical. They didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake. They're willing to drop the ungrateful thing if you just tell the judge it was a misunderstanding. You know how they are. They just forgot." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me grow up in a minefield and told me to tiptoe. And honestly, I didn't feel angry. I felt nothing. I reached for the bedside table. I picked up the discharge summary the doctor had left. I didn't say a word. I just handed it to her. She read it. Severe anaphylaxis. Hypoxia. Evidence of long-term medical neglect. Patient states parents sold prescribed adrenaline. She stopped reading. She put the paper down. She looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't have an excuse. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and walked out. I never saw her again. The legal fallout wasn't a thunderstorm. It was a slow, grinding erosion. Peter and Linda didn't go to prison for decades. The justice system is messy, and reckless endangerment often gets pleaded down when you have an expensive lawyer, which they did, until the money ran out. They got 2 years of probation, mandatory parenting classes, which was ironic, considering I was 18 by the time the gavel banged, and community service. But the real prison wasn't concrete. It was economic. See, Peter worked in high-level corporate consulting. It's a job based entirely on reputation and background checks. When you Google his name now, the first result isn't his LinkedIn profile or his thought leader articles. It's the mugshot. And it's the police report detailing how he sold his daughter's life-saving medicine for concert tickets. He was fired 3 days after the arrest. No severance. No reference. Linda fared worse. The cool mom persona requires an audience, and her audience turned on her with the ferocity of a pack of wolves. The concert friends, the ones who were laughing in my driveway, they gave statements against her to avoid being charged as accomplices. They threw her under the bus so fast it was almost impressive. The neighborhood ostracized them. Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor they mocked, started a petition to have them removed from the HOA board. They went from being the kings of the cul-de-sac to the pariahs that nobody would make eye contact with at the grocery store. The house was the next thing to go. With no jobs and legal fees piling up, the bank didn't care about their vibe. They cared about the mortgage. I drove past the old house a year later. I didn't go in. I just parked down the street and watched. There was a foreclosure sign on the lawn. The grass, which Peter used to pay a service to manicure, was waist high. The windows were dark. The BMW was gone. It looked small. That was the strangest part. The house that had felt like a fortress of terror for my entire childhood just looked like a sad, rotting box of wood and brick. Basically, they wanted a life without responsibility. And the universe gave it to them. They have no child to care for. No house to maintain. No corporate job to stress over. They are free. And they are destitute. As for me, I'm 24 now. I live in a second-floor apartment in the city. It's not huge, but it's mine. The walls are thick. And the neighbors are quiet. I work as a pharmacist. Every day I hand people the medicine that keeps them alive. I see the relief in their eyes when they pick up their insulin, their inhalers, their EpiPens. I treat those boxes with reverence. I know what they weigh. My parents tried to reach out once, about 2 years ago. I got a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was Linda. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She just wrote that they were going through a hard transition and asked if I could help out for old times' sake, implying that I owed them for raising me. I didn't burn the letter. That would be dramatic. I just put it in the shredder. Watching the paper turn into confetti was therapeutic. Tonight, before I sat down to tell you this, I did my nightly routine. I walked into my kitchen. I made dinner. Safely. I washed my own dishes. Then I walked into my bedroom. I don't have a lockbox under my bed anymore. I don't need one. I opened the top drawer of my nightstand. Inside, there is a plastic organizer. And in that organizer, sitting in a perfect neat row, are 6 EpiPens. I checked the expiration dates. All good. I picked one up, feeling the cool plastic in my hand. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel the panic of scarcity. I felt an overwhelming sense of abundance. I put the pen back. I closed the drawer. The sound was soft, a gentle click that signaled safety. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the lonely silence of neglect. It was the peaceful silence of a sanctuary. I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with air, clear, unobstructed, free. And let me tell you, it tasted like victory.